Welcome, everyone, to the Listen Care Fully podcast. I am so delighted to have our guest today. This is Amy Colman. She's a holistic nutritionist. She does human design readings, and she is so well versed in terms of just the holistic lifestyle and just connecting these different ways of self and allowing ourselves to grow and meet ourselves where we are. And I'm so glad to have you today. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. So I would love to hear just a little bit of your background, or as much as you'd love to share about how you got here today and what you're up to. And also if there have been any moments along your journey that have really shaped the course of
Mm.
your life and your becoming.
Starting with the deep questions. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, by the way, for that beautiful intro. And, as you mentioned, I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'm also a human design reader, and I use and leverage the lineages of Ayurveda as well as yoga to support the embodiment piece of the work that I do. And I was really blessed. I grew up in a family they're incredible. My mom had a garden. My parents would make so many different types of homemade goodies and canned goods. And that was just how I got to grow up. And attached to that was also a lot of attachments to food and the emotional side of eating and, being served plates that were really, really big and kind of like you're not allowed to leave till you finish it. There were so many pieces and different attachments to food. And at one point, I just took a look at what I was doing with my food, and I was eating a lot of meat and dairy at the time, and I was really sick. I was always sick. I didn't actually know that I was sick though. At this point, I was 18 years old and I had always been this way. It was normal to just feel terrible after eating, to have really low energy, to have acne, to be 60 pounds overweight. Like there were so many cards stacked against me at this point in my life. And when I decided at 18 to become vegetarian, it was a very quick decision. And that was the beginning of a huge snowball spiral of life events that have brought me to where I am today. So, first I lost like 50 pounds going vegetarian, which made me think I was doing things right. But I ended up in the hospital. I had an abscess the size of a golf ball on my tonsil. And I realized in the hospital that I wasn't doing it right. I was actually very sick and my body was it was screaming at me to do something differently. Um, so, I'm kind of skipping some pieces in here to keep the story succinct, but essentially it was literally while I was in the hospital bed, I saw an advertisement for the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. And I thought, okay, it's time that I get my stuff together and try and figure out my nutrition things. So I went to school, and that was the most transformational experience I've ever had in my life. It really shone this incredible light on what it means to be in my body. And I honestly think for the first, at that point I was around 23 years old, but for the first 23 years of my life, I didn't feel like I was actually in my body or connected to my body. I was just going through life on autopilot based on what I'd learned from my family, based on what I'd learned from my peers and from television, which, I think for a lot of us had a huge part in raising me. So
Mhm.
finally, the awareness was turned inward, and I had this chance to really listen carefully, to my body and realize that she wasn't happy. I was feeding her all the wrong foods. I was feeding her the wrong thoughts. Every time I would look at myself in the mirror, it was thoughts of hatred and self-loathing, and it became this new, dare I say, obsession of mine to try and figure out what does it mean to actually be in this experience, conscious of every single thing that happens and truly listening moment to moment and then recalibrating based on the information I received. So that was the beginning of the journey. And then I did a yoga teacher training, which added this new layer, this new energetics layer, this more holistic sort of aspect. And then I studied Ayurveda after that point, which, for anyone listening who's not aware of Ayurveda, it's an ancient medical system that comes from India. And it's actually the sister science to yoga. And then from there, it became a human design thing, which really supported me in understanding the energetics and mechanics of how we're supposed to move. And it added this new layer of individuality when it comes to our digestion. which I feel like we'll probably talk about a lot on today's episode, our digestion and what that really means on an individual level. You know, some of us really do digest better after dark. We're more night owls. Some of us digest better in the day. There's so many individual pieces to it. So all of that to say, it's been just over a decade of exploration and experimentation and learning and applying and embodying. And I don't think that it's anywhere close to being done, but I know that at this point I've found a flow and it feels good. It feels energizing. It feels supportive. And I'm grateful to be here.
Wow, so special. And I love that each layer presented itself at different times just to give you those downloads of exactly what you needed at that time. And I love how, one thing connected to the next and one thing led to the next thing. And there's so much expansion in that. Like just hearing about your story and you taking your health into your own hands and having to be at the point where you were really ready to do that. No one could do it for you or say, like, now's the time. It's just like, I feel like such a big part of like this awakening and realization is coming into that for yourself and just allowing yourself to be led, whether it is from those little whispers around you or like your higher self, like tapping you on the shoulder of like, hey, this nutrition's
Mhm.
cool. Or, like it's so powerful because I think a lot of the time, at least sometimes, like the people that I work with are just, the people that are in this self-healing or developmental space, it's like we can sometimes get down on ourselves at the beginning of why didn't I know this sooner? Or, and just having that reframe of like, this is exactly when I needed it. It makes so much sense that it was so random or that it was just now
Mm,
occurring. Like I just think about the ways that we know each other and it's like we were both in a mentorship program, but in different pods, but somehow like still cross paths. And for those of you that don't know, Amy was my nutrition coach and opened my world to so much. Like being plant-based, there is so much that
mm,
we get to learn about, like eating whole foods and really flooding our systems with nutrition and really like overdoing it from that nutritional sense so that we can flourish and we can like go to bed and wake up with energy. It doesn't
mm.
have to be like this lethargic thing where we're swimming through the world. And I love how you described that too when you were touching into your childhood of like, this is just how I thought it was, like that feeling of eating Thanksgiving and then you just can't move. But like normalizing that, and as we're going into the winter months, I feel like there's going to be a lot of support required when it comes to our mental health and our emotional health. And I love the lens that you take about how we can learn about our own digestion so that when we know ourselves and our unique rhythms, that we can really tend to our own individual unique needs. And sometimes that's
Mm.
not looking like everyone else, or that's not doing what's normal or what we think is what we've been conditioned to believe is normal. So
Absolutely.
food for thought. It's like we're here to revolutionize so many destructive patterns that we think are regular.
Hmm. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think that we're all sort of taught collectively. It's not just something we learn from our parents or our teachers. It's really a collective sort of paradigm that we're all supposed to behave a certain way in order to fit into society, in order to be loved and valued and supported and to survive. It's really this base survival need. So we lose ourselves somewhere along the line. And it's fascinating to see that, in the space that you're in the space that I work in, it's all about coming back. It's like recollecting these lost parts of ourselves and coming back to our home base and what is really true for us. And that individuality, that spark we each bring to the table is really what makes it so special and lively and colorful to be a person on this planet right now. So yeah, I mean, I really, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yes, I would love to hear about human design. And I know little bits about it. I know our reading is coming up too. And just for those who have heard like these little tidbits about human design but want to learn more, like I'd love to hear about just how the foundational levels can support people in their daily decision making, and also how different energy centers affect how they best can move through the world.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to jam on this. And, I'm just going to start with a little preface for anybody who's like, human design, what is that? Or maybe you've heard the word floating around before. Human design is a system. It is a combination of the chakra system, the I Ching, the Kabbalah, quantum physics, and genetic code science, as well as astrology. So it's this really beautiful, intricate, kind of complex system that tells us about our energetics, how we're actually designed to move through the world. And the thing about human design is you don't have to believe in it, right? It's not a spiritual sort of woo-woo. And I am a woo-woo kind of person, don't get me wrong, but it's actually rooted in science. And this is truly how you were designed to move energetically through the world. So when we are, basically in order to find out your human design, you need to know your exact birth time, your birthplace, and obviously your birth date. And what you're going to do is plug that into, I like to use mybodygraph.com. There's also myhumandesign.com, and you can go ahead and search them on there. And it's going to pop up and it'll tell you your energy type. And you're either going to be one of 5 energy types, which are manifestors, generators, manifesting generators, projectors, and reflectors. And once you have that energy type, that's going to be the first most important thing you're looking at. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the second most important thing you're looking for is your authority. And your authority or intuition, right? We can use those words sort of interchangeably, is going to be like how you make decisions in your life. So circling back for a moment on how we can really use our human design, the first thing you're looking for is your energy type. So for me, I'm actually a generator, and generators are about 70% of the population. So we make up the majority of the population. And what was so empowering about learning this system was like, oh, I have been moving in a way that is so incorrect for how I'm meant to move, for how I'm designed to move. And basically, generators have this huge sacral center that is defined. And the sacral center in this system is your motor, it's our life force, right? And that life force is generated with creative energy, with sexual energy, with joy and playfulness. And what most of us are taught to do is to work, to hustle hard, to grind, to keep your head down, to do more. And unfortunately, the majority of people on this planet get really, really good at doing things that we don't actually love. And that energy, generally speaking, is so depleting. It's degenerative. And so generators, like I mentioned, we're about, and this is between generators and manifesting generators, they move in a very similar way. We take up about 70% of the population. And the rest of the population, the other 30%, is actually borrowing our life force energy. And so we can kind of see this when we look around the planet, right? Like standing in line at the grocery store, look around and observe how people are in their bodies, right? Observe how they're behaving, how they seem to feel. If 70% of those people you're observing are generators and they're depleted and you're borrowing that energy, you then are also going to become depleted. So what's so important for the generators and manifesting generators is getting really good at doing something that you really love, right? Including play in your daily schedule, including something that's going to bring you joy, and really finding time to flex that muscle of enjoyment and tapping back into your inner child a little bit. What's going to happen then is we have this overflow of rejuvenative energy, right? That playful, joyful life force that we then share with the rest of the world. And all of the other energy types then get to borrow a healthy type of energy. So really, like we have to think about this in the terms of synergy and how we're all designed to move together. So that we also have projectors. They're about 21% of the population. Now, projectors are not actually designed to do, they're not designed to be workers. And again, when we look at like how society values work, right? Projectors don't have that same vital life force energy inside of them. They're borrowing it from the external world. And so we see so many people who are projectors, right? Who are burning out and they're getting, they're doing a lot of work when really their gift, what they're here to offer, is insight. They have this gift of sight. They have this gift and ability to see things from a zoomed out lens and to offer a perspective that is going to make things more efficient. So in my mind, they're like the project managers of the world. We can think about the rest of us are wandering around in the forest, getting lost, and the projector is like the eagle above the field, guiding us all. So then we also have manifestors, and manifestors are about 9% of the population. Manifestors are like this big, bold, powerful, initiative energy. And when they are in their power, when they are in alignment with that, they actually have this ability to like bring something to life so fast. They're like a rocket, right? You think about a rocket when it's launching and it's this huge amount of energy and fire and it just shoots up and then it kind of slows down. And that's actually how the manifestor is meant to work in these surges of energy followed by a rest period. And again, they're sort of put into these spaces where they're meant to be consistent, when actually manifestors are by design inconsistent. And then finally, we have our reflectors. And oh my goodness, what really sets reflectors apart is when you open up your graph, your body chart, they have a completely open chart, meaning there's no colored in definition. And they are actually designed to be at the center of society, like our oracle, right? They have this ability to feel into their environment, to feel into the energies of people around them and reflect it back. So they reflect back the health of a society. So our reflector friends out there, they're 1% of the population, right? I'm sure we each know one, even if we don't know that they're a reflector. But once we know this, we can start to look at them and say, how is your health? Like if their health is low and if they're not doing very well, we can see that that's actually a reflection of the environment that they're in, whether that's on an individual personal level or more on a collective level. So when we really understand the energy types, right? In the perfect world, we are going to have the manifestors, the 9% of manifestors. They're going to be here and they're going to be coming up with these really crazy, never been done before ideas that are like, they're the trailblazers. They bring it to life, they initiate it, and they actually initiate the generators then into action. The generators are going to be like, ooh, I'm either down for the mission and I'm on that train, or they're going to be like, no, I'm good. I'll wait for the next thing to respond to. Generators then kind of pick it up and we start to bring it to life. We're the builders and we have that consistent energy to do this. And then ideally, we'd have the projectors coming in being like, okay, great. I'm going to help you make this more efficient. We're going to help to streamline this project or creative expression that you're bringing to life. And we're going to make sure that it runs smoothly and that it's going to be supportive. And then we would take this completed initiative project or whatever it is to the reflectors to then reflect back. How are we doing? Right? How is this supporting us? How is this bringing a new life, a new energy to this planet? And can you reflect that back to us? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's so powerful because, well, the first thing I thought about was what if everyone knew their type, just to have the awareness. Like, what if everybody knew where they were coming from? Because let's just say that we find out what our design is and what we're made for. I imagine like that would allow us to see where we're out of balance and where we need to tend to deeper, because like for me personally, I know like it's an energy thing. Like something that I've always done that I'm changing is like this over giving, like the giving tree, like just give, give, give until you're empty and there's nothing left. But it's always been this thing of like, I don't have enough energy,
Mm,
and I think like learning about the spurts and the inconsistency, like that's validating, even though I've been so conditioned to just go, 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 you know?
mhm,
But like even reflecting on like how coming back from a trip, I was feeling exhausted. It's like, right, because I'm supposed to, or I'm supposed to slow down a bit. So it does feel really validating. And then it also, I think, amplifies those places that are out of balance. And I just imagine if everybody knew their type, there might be less stress. There might be, um, I don't know, like less
yeah.
to worry about in a way, even if it feels challenging to like identify with your type if you're still glued
Mhm.
to the conditioning or resistant to who you really are.
Yeah, no, you're so right. Like I have this vision in my mind of this new world, right? The new paradigm where everybody's aware of this, where all of the parents in the world, as soon as their child is brought into the world, before they leave the hospital, they're given this user manual, this blueprint to your child's soul, right? Which is essentially what human design is. It's giving us a specific blueprint on how we were meant to operate. Like imagine, you're driving automatic, you're driving a car and you're just kind of driving and you don't really need to know that much, but it's such a different experience to have the user manual of a manual transmission car. You have the whole manual, you've read through the whole thing, you know every in and out of that car, you know exactly how to drive it, when to shift gears, all of it. And that's the difference between knowing your human design, being on autopilot, driving your automatic car, versus being someone who is aware of this. You're driving with more intention, right? You know the ins and outs. You can listen for little sounds the car is making and know exactly what it means. So when I think about this new paradigm, this new world, it's a bunch of people who are honoring and respecting their needs, their boundaries, their energetics, the mechanics of how they move, and also respecting the people around them. Because I can look at you and just, for everyone listening, Jen, you're a manifester, right? So you have these bursts of energy and then these rest periods. And if I know this about you as a generator, I'm not going to then influence your work habits with my own, which is a little bit more consistent. It allows me to really step back and say, oh, you're going to actually be more in your gift, more in your power, and you're going to be able to get so much more impact through the work that you do when you are honoring your surges and your rest periods. And it's the same thing with projectors, the same thing with reflectors. And it's just this, it's about synergy, and it's about understanding and sort of breaking these shackles and these paradigms of homogenized living. We've been in this paradigm for far too long at this point, and I think we're all feeling it, especially after the last few years. We're all feeling it. So how can we have this new language and this new blueprint to understand how we are actually meant to move and remove resistance, remove force, remove our not self themes of anger, of bitterness, of frustration, and of disappointment? And how can we actually feel a sense of peace, a sense of, success, a sense of satisfaction, and a sense of surprise and delight?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I feel like the first time I've heard about human design, I remember feeling overwhelmed because, as you mentioned, it's related to astrology. And then, you hear about like gene keys, humans, like, at least for me, I was hearing about all these things and I was like, am I missing something? Like, are there things I don't know? Like I got to dip my toe in all of these things. And what's interesting is like, for whatever reason, astrology's always felt a little overwhelming for me, but yet I always love to get a reading or to hear about it deeper. And it's similar to human design in the sense that there's just so many elements to your chart, even if, like, am I understanding this correctly? Like, even if um, you're a manifester, or let's say you have two manifestors in the same room, like even though you're both manifestors, there's still these unique aspects, right, to each chart because of the birth time and having it all be
Absolutely.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, the chances of somebody having the exact same chart as you is super, super low. And even if somebody has the exact same chart as you, let's say to the T, the moment you were born, the place you were born, everything, your life experience, your cultural background, your upbringing, the way that you communicate with people around you, all of that is going to influence how you express your design. So
Mhm.
yes, it's a tool and it's a language, but even though there's two manifestors in the room, there could be a splenic manifestor, somebody who's more intuitive and in the moment. And then there could be an emotional manifestor, somebody who needs to ride a wave before coming to a decision, before coming to conclusion. And that in itself is such a huge difference in how you're going to operate. So it's not so much about, I want to just honor that when you first look at human design, it's scary, it's terrifying, it's this big system, and it's like, what? I heard about human design, I want to say back in 2019 or 2020, and I just wasn't ready. I looked at it and I thought, nope, I'm good. Astrology is more than enough for me right now. And even that I'm not super sharp on. And it took another year and a half or so to finally reopen it, have a reading, start to discover more about myself, and then go down that rabbit hole of trying to figure out what does all of this actually mean. So for those of you who are new to human design, if you're going to be opening up your chart, just I want to give you some peace of mind. It might feel scary at first, but it all becomes super clear. And if you have the opportunity to get a reading or to do a little bit of research, if that's going to be more supportive for you, it will absolutely change your life. And especially those of you who have children, like
Mhm.
children are born into this world living in their design. We condition them out of it. So understanding this is not just important for you, it's important for the next generation to be in their power, to be able to bring their gifts to the world unencumbered by all of the conditioning that we experience. So, in a way, it's sort of like our duty as this generation to support the next generation in being more of themselves. And this is one way that we can do that.
Exactly. And I feel like there's so many change makers right now. There's so many disruptors. Like there's so many, I mean, the kids that I see, they're being labeled of like troublemaker or, name
Oh,
caller or, and it's just like we're all dealing with so much because we're finding out, who we really are. And I love that you described the differences too, because it's like even with twins, it's like that their souls are their own unique
mm,
souls, So whether we, yeah, find ways to support our design or we just get to know ourselves more deeply in effort to be ourselves, in effort to shed these layers and have true, you know, meaning for who we are, I think that's going to be so revolutionary. We're coming out of, like, I love to say, what we repress, our children express. So it's like we're coming,
mm,
yeah, like we're
I
coming
love
out,
that.
totally. Like we're moving out of this, like, getting in trouble for who you are into like just feeling really secure and safe and being able to express everything, but then like that's triggering to the parents, right? But then it's like our parents want us, like parents at least that I work with, they want their kids to be that way, but then they're trying to find balance too, where it's like, they're so open that they're like, wow, the stuff that my kids say to me, it's like I would have never been able to say that to my parents. But then it's like they're proud that their kids can, but then they're still striving for that balance of like, okay, how do we find the middle ground and we're not like swinging to these extremes? So, yeah, I think human design would be such a powerful tool for parents, especially to just get to know themselves, get to know their own patterns, get to know their own styles, and see how that lands. I also want to get
Mhm.
into the digestion piece, like how we digest our lives and what we process and what we metabolize and how we might internalize something if we're kids or even if we're adults, like, and how we can, yeah, have that sense of self and still face
Mm.
what we're going through.
Can I just say I'm loving this conversation right now? I've got the biggest smile on my face because it's just, I have this vision in my mind of like every school system across the world picking up human design, and that's part of the curriculum. And I really do see this as being an important conversation to sort of bring that vision to life.
Mhm.
And thank you for asking about digestion. I think that this is something we very often mm, where to start? When I say the word digestion, for most people, they're going to hear that and they're going to think bloating or constipation or smooth digestion or whatever it is. But we are constantly digesting everything, every conversation we have, all of our emotions. We're digesting the feeling we get when we walk into a room, the energies. We're digesting our food. We're digesting our thoughts. Every single thing in our world needs to be processed and digested. So I love the saying when, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, because this really stands true when we're talking about our holistic nutrition. And a quick digression, when I say nutrition, it's very similar to the word digestion. It's not just food, right? We're talking about how you nourish yourself. Do you nourish yourself with a soothing bath and candles at the end of the day? Do you nourish yourself with sensual time with your partner? Do you nourish yourself with, whatever it is? There's so many ways we can nourish ourselves. So holistic nutrition is really about optimizing our digestion. And if you're noticing that you're the type of person who is anxious, for instance, if you have a lot of anxiety, like pay attention to what's going on in your body as well. How are you digesting food? If you find that you're the kind of person who overworks quite a lot, maybe it's because of, maybe there's some scarcity attached to that. Maybe there's a sense of needing to feel valued, whatever it is. But if you're overworking and blowing out your boundaries, how is your digestion? How are your habits around food? Are you kind of blowing out your boundaries in that area as well? Are you eating, sporadically whenever you can think to do it because you don't feel like you can take a break? There's so many ways we can look at this, and digestion is such a huge conversation, which is why it's my specialty, because I love this stuff. And it's so fascinating to look at children even and just pay attention to like what is their natural way of being, and where does my conditioning then influence them to change their way, to move out of their natural way of being. More than anything, right, all that we're doing in this conversation is offering a permission slip to be more of yourself. That is what human design does. That is what you do, Jen. That is what my mission is as well, is be the human permission slip to like let you just do your thing in the way that feels the best for you. So, there's a lot of angles we can take on this, but just to stay in alignment for a moment with human design, for instance, there's actually a whole component. So remember when I mentioned that this is a science, it's also got to do with genetic code science and quantum physics. It essentially gives us a language to understand how we as individuals are designed to digest. So there's a few aspects in human design, and this is a more high level sort of advanced look at the system, but it teaches us how, like, what time of the day is going to be best to eat and to exercise, how we best take in information. Do we take in a lot of information at one time and absorb it and digest it? Or are we best when we take in one piece of information or one piece of food at a time rather than a whole bowl of salad or whatever? Some people actually require eating more hot foods. Some people require colder foods. Some people are better to eat at night after dark or in indirect light, whereas some people are better during the day. There are so many ways that we can look at this, which is why when it comes down to digestion as a whole, I just want to, if you take nothing from this conversation except for this, please do. There is no such thing as a one size fits all. There just isn't. When it comes to digestion, when it comes to our diet, when it comes to our nutrition, when it comes to the way that we move through life, we must, it is our duty to look at the individual's nature and see how we can work with that. So, just bringing this conversation back to the parents who are listening to this, and you're looking at your children, and I invite you to really recognize, like, where do I influence them to do something differently? Am I, making them sit at the table and like eat their whole meal before they leave? Or is that part of my own conditioning? Are they the kind of kid who doesn't like to eat their food when it's touching and they like to eat around the plate? This is a really big one. And I know that can frustrate a lot of people, like, just eat the food. It doesn't matter. It's all going to the same place. But for them, that actually might be more aligned for them because they actually take in that information and digest it better one food at a time. Is your child the kind of kid who doesn't want to eat first thing in the morning? Or are you the kind of person who doesn't want to eat first thing in the morning, but there's conditioning around, quote, breakfast being the most important meal of the day? How can we allow ourselves to be more in flow with what is our nature? And just notice how that starts to affect our digestion on all levels. So one more quick note, because I could jam on this forever, literally forever. I really like to think of it in layers, right? Like, we are in Ayurveda and in yoga, we refer to the koshas, Koshas. And we have essentially 5 different koshas, and those koshas are like layers of our being. The most dense layer is our physical being. And then we have our energy layer, our mental layer, our visual and emotional layer. And then we have our more spiritual layer, or kosha. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we digest in all of those layers, all of those koshas. So if we start with the body, right, the most dense experience, the one that all of us can look at, we can't deny that the body is there. We can't deny that food doesn't exist, all of this, right? It's very tangible and real. We start there. We start by improving our digestion, by living in alignment with what is true for us, by, improving the types of foods we're taking in, by mastering our digestion. And it automatically starts to filter into those more ethereal layers. Suddenly our relationships become easier, right? More resistance free. We have more capacity to communicate, listen authentically, from the heart. We suddenly are able to process old memories, things that maybe we didn't even think of from our own childhood, traumas of all different levels, whether it was a minor trauma or a major traumas, we might start to have memories popping up from this life, maybe past lives, whatever it is. And suddenly we're able to digest them, to process them differently, to alchemize them into something that supports us into, like the new version of ourselves. And this is actually how we bring ourselves closer to what we call in yoga as samadhi, right? Samadhi is really like a sense of peacefulness, contentment, bliss. So this is kind of my perspective on digestion. It's really more so than just the food we're putting in. It's every single thing that we do. I hope that that is concise. I'm going to stop talking now because I feel, yeah, it's a big conversation.
I just love how you intertwine them all. And I just see your passion come through because it is so important to see each individual for who they are in their fullness and in their wholeness. It's like rewinding. It's like we're already whole when we come here, we're already it. And then it's like, how do we support that and nurture that and value that for what it is and allow that to be? Like, it's so interesting. As you were sharing that, I was thinking about how, like you were mentioning, that to start to notice ways that you may or may not influence your children, for example, based on your own patterns or conditioning. And when I was home, I came across a whole like art box that I had never been through before. My mom like saved all of the years of all of the things. And I came across this note from a teacher and it said, Jennifer appears to be confident. However, she becomes very heartbroken when others are upset, and so like the empath in me way back then, I feel like it was only a couple years ago that I came to terms with like, oh, I'm an empath, but it's like that was happening back then in preschool where it was like I was taking on things that didn't belong to me. I was picking things up that weren't mine. And then like at the very end of the letter, it said, she needs more hugs, and that's like,
Oh.
felt so seen because it was like physical touch, hugs, like all of that is one of my love languages along with food. And I didn't um have that in that way. And so it was interesting to see that because it was like, whoa, that was different than like the ways that my parents had their love languages, So it's like, even though I was supported to the best of their ability, it's like I found that letter and I was like, whoa, this feels so validating for me today. Like I just imagine if, like, let's say the note said like, try out human design or, like look into who you really are, and yeah, I think just to have that as a kid, to have that support of like you're already doing it, there's nothing more you need to do. Like as we transition into more of being, it's like there's not much more you need to do, you
Mhm.
need to find out who you be. I know that's a phrase you say a lot and I love that because it's like, yeah, let's amplify that, let's enhance that, let's dive deeper into who we are without like just continuing to layer on more masks, because we're really here to just uncover and shed the layers that don't belong to us that we might have pick up on along the way. And also like why, like it doesn't necessarily matter the why we picked it up, but it's like, okay, we can learn to let it go also,
Oh, I love that reflection of, the seeing the note from your teacher and remembering that when you were a kid, you were picking up on so much of that. And remind me, I don't have your chart in front of me, but you're a splenic manifester, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that you have your emotional center completely undefined. And,
Oh,
just for the
shoot.
listeners here, when we're undefined in an area, it's basically like we're a receptor. So those of us, I also have an undefined emotional center. We're more truly empathic. Like we pick up from our environment around us, everything that's going on, any emotional shift, any emotional change, and we actually process it in our body. We, in other words, digest it in our bodies. So what's so interesting, what I'm hearing you say, Jen, is like when you were a kid, you were in that element already. And for myself, it was a very similar thing. And due to conditioning from the world, from my family, from television, et cetera, it was like,
Mhm.
quote, this is how you're supposed to digest. This is how you're supposed to feel. You shouldn't be feeling this way. That's not yours. Like there was so much removal from that. And so, what I'm hearing you say is you kind of came right full circle, 3 decades later, and you're like, all right, now I'm ready to embrace. I am an empath. That is natural for me. And like, instead of trying to lean away from it because society will tell us it's bad, it's how can I lean into that and see it as one of my superpowers, as something I'm actually here to offer the world, is a reflection of emotional intelligence and emotional processing and digestion.
Yeah, and I just remembered we're both Leos too, so we have that, like, fire, we have that, like,
Mm,
shine, and we have that just we're ready.
yes, yes. I'm actually really curious to know, like, I know you and I have a reading coming up, and I'm super excited to do a human design reading with you, Jen, but I'm curious to know, based on what you've learned about it, how has that shifted your own, yeah, method of moving through the world? What's shifted for you?
I think for me, well, especially learning, like, what I have about and how you said, like, the permission slip to just be who I am, like, even just spending this past weekend around my family, I was receiving a lot of messaging about how to behave or, those subtle ways that just come out, and it's interesting because this was probably one of the first times that I was just like, "No, I don't have to actually subscribe to that," and I was I was, like, on the travel day getting ready to go, but I remember I woke up naturally, and then I, like, decided to go back to bed, and, like, that was something that I, like, allowed myself to do, and I received a comment of like, "Well, if you didn't go back to bed, you could have gotten that thing done that extra thing or whatever," and, it's just like, "Yeah, yeah, I hear you," but then, like, rather than being like, "Oh, maybe they're right," like, maybe, like, I could have gone out of my way to do that other thing, even though, like, I was already accepting of, "I'll just do it next time I'm home," or next time I visit, and it was just that moment of, like, I think I said, "You know what? That was just as important." Like, me
Mhm.
resting, me tending to what I needed, like, I was like, "That was" I think I said something like, "That was just as valuable,"
Yeah.
it wasn't that I had to, like, make a sacrifice, it was like, "No, that was actually just as valuable." And then I had, like,
Mhm.
several synchronicities happen, which tend to happen anyways, but, like, my neighbor's daughter, they were headed to the airport too, and it was just like that synchronicity, like, it just lined up perfectly, and so, yeah, just like that reminder of, "No, you did go with your gut, and it was totally fine." You didn't
Mm.
need any external approval, and that's, of course, one of my personal things too, of just having, like, that mental chatter, or the shoulds, which are never helpful anyways, but just yeah, like sticking to the intuition, knowing that that is how I am. I think the biggest mantra for me to remember that is I am exactly where I need to be.
Mm.
I am exactly where I need to be. And then you can't go wrong with that. And some people may be like, well, that's bypassing or that's this and that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm at the point where I'm willing to just let go of that mental panic, urgency, whatever conditioning that is, and just to like anchor into that deeper trust and knowing of like, no, I've done everything I need to do. I'm exactly where I need to be. And I'm at a point now where that feels exciting because, yeah,
Mm.
maybe people don't get it. Maybe it doesn't click for someone else. But for me, that's all I need to know. I don't have to prove it to anybody of why it's that way.
Mhm.
It's interesting. It's like
Mhm.
in the past, I probably would have felt the need to prove it, but not really the need for myself, but just again, that approval from others or permission slip, yada, yada, yada. So,
Mm. You said something really important. And I want to take a moment to reflect it back that when you listened to yourself, suddenly there were multiple synchronicities that followed.
mhm,
And that, oh man, that's the beauty of being in alignment with your truth, your capital T truth. And you will notice that suddenly you're put into these situations that you can't make this stuff up. Like that it just life worked out perfectly because I listened, because I honored what was needed for me.
Yeah.
Mm. Thank you for that
So
share.
much magic, like so much magic. And that's the thing too, is like I love to just track it so that I can like build upon all of this evidence of like, remember that time that you listened to your inner voice, even though like your head was saying something different, you know? Or when something doesn't work out, like I like one of my favorite Indian restaurants was not open and I was so sad. And then like I was just like, well, fine, I'm gonna go somewhere else instead. And it was like, no, you're just like not gonna go anywhere else. Like that was just like the answer. But like my head was like pouting, like, no, I'm gonna make up for that loss. But rather the lesson was like, no, like you're just gonna let it be. So,
Mm,
and then that had to do with part of the synchronicity too, of like the timing. Like I'm glad I didn't go off to try to do something else, or, you know, like the timing was all relevant. So
mm,
there's always
mm,
time too, like not having to like rush it or force it or make it happen, but just like acceptance of what is. I think that's probably one of my edges right now too, of like not having to, you know, have it be perfectly according to
mm,
like what I thought it was going to be, but just allowing it to be what it is.
mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, Earth School. It's got so many lessons for us.
Oh my gosh, like we're here, we're fully in it.
Oh man, so true. I love that.
That. Well, are there any other closing remarks or anything that you would like to leave the listeners with? Any tidbits or any non-negotiables when it comes to
Mm.
wellness?
Oh, so many non-negotiables. But I would say at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy it, let it go. If you don't enjoy it, let it go. And this is going for anybody who is doing a diet or anybody who is, like holding on to clothing in their closet that doesn't quite fit because one day maybe like there's so many things that this can apply to. If you're going to the gym every day because there's obligation behind it, but you don't actually enjoy it, let it go. How can we invite the space and the opportunities that are going to light us up? And that might look like, doing a closet purge and bringing a bunch of those old clothes to a shelter, right? So somebody else can use them and enjoy them and gain, receive benefits from them. How can we stop doing the diet or stop looking in the mirror and saying like, oh, we should change, and start to lean into acceptance and start to lean into a way of eating, a way of nourishing ourselves that we actually enjoy doing? And how can we find a movement practice, an embodiment practice that feels good? Maybe it's a dance class, maybe it's kickboxing, maybe it's, running or whatever it is, and letting go of any of the obligation and really questioning it, right? More than anything, we need to question everything. Where did this belief system come from? Who told me that I'm supposed to look a certain way? Who told me that I need to eat this way? Who told me this? And why is that my truth? Is that really my truth? Or is my truth somewhere a little bit deeper? And can I access it? Can I listen to it? And can I live in alignment with that?
Mm, so much juice, so
Mhm.
much packed to the punch. Wow. Yeah, just
Mhm.
starting there is gonna unravel so much because then we get to be in our integrity, you know? We're not
Mm,
doing anything for anyone else that is
mhm.
not in alignment if it's not for us and our highest good. So, yeah.
Word.
Well, where can listeners find you if they want to learn more, or if they are ready to dive into a human design reading, or if they'd like to just see your work?
Absolutely. I spend currently most of my time over on Instagram. You can find me Amy Activates, AMY. I've also got a little YouTube channel that I've got growing on, and my website is namatastenutrition.com. So feel free to reach out. I love hearing from people, and I'm always so excited just to make connections and support you on this wellness journey.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time and your energy today. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here, Jen. And to everybody who's listening, Oh, you're all beautiful. This is such a beautiful space that you've created, and I appreciate you.
You too. Big love.
Mwah.